Have you ever wondered how a single election could tear a nation apart? Let's rewind to 1860. The United States was a nation on edge, deeply divided over the issue of slavery. When Abraham Lincoln, a candidate from the newly formed Republican Party, won the presidency without a single Southern electoral vote, the South saw it as a direct threat to their way of life and economy and society, built on the institution of slavery. For them, Lincoln's victory was the final straw. The reaction was swift and dramatic. In December 1860, just a month after the election, South Carolina declared its independence, seceding from the Union. It was like a single crack in a dam that quickly spiderwebbed. By February 1861, before Lincoln was even inaugurated, 6 more states had followed: Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. This wasn't just a protest. It was a full-blown rebellion. These states believed the federal government no longer represented their interests and that their right to own slaves was under imminent attack. What do you do when you leave a country? You form a new one. In Montgomery, Alabama, delegates from these 7 seceded states gathered to create the Confederate States of America. They drafted their own constitution, which was strikingly similar to the U.S. Constitution, but with a few crucial, telling differences. It explicitly protected the institution of slavery in all its territories, and emphasized the sovereignty of individual states over the power of the central government. They elected their own president, Jefferson Davis, a former U.S. Senator from Mississippi. The stage was set for a monumental confrontation. The United States was no longer united. But Lincoln wasn't going to let the nation dissolve. In his inaugural address in March 1861, he struck a firm yet conciliatory tone. He declared that he had no intention of interfering with slavery where it already existed, but he also made it clear that secession was illegal and that he would preserve the Union at all costs. He pleaded with the South, saying, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies." The nation held its breath, waiting to see who would make the first move. The standoff wouldn't last long. The flashpoint came at Fort Sumter, a federal outpost in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. The fort was a symbol of Union authority in the heart of the rebellion. As its supplies dwindled, Lincoln made the fateful decision to send a relief expedition. For the Confederacy, this was an act of aggression. They demanded the fort's surrender. When the Union commander refused, Confederate cannons opened fire on April 12, 1861. The bombardment lasted for 34 hours until the fort finally surrendered. Not a single soldier was killed in the battle, but those cannon shots were the deafening start of the deadliest war in American history. The attack on Fort Sumter galvanized the North. Lincoln's call for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion was met with an enthusiastic response. But it also forced the remaining southern states to choose a side. The choice was clear for 4 more states: Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina. They seceded and joined the Confederacy, bringing the total number of states in rebellion to 11. The line had been drawn. The crisis of secession had erupted into a full-scale civil war. What began as a conflict to preserve the Union would evolve into something much more profound. Initially, the war wasn't explicitly about ending slavery. Lincoln's primary goal was to bring the seceded states back into the fold. However, as the war dragged on, the moral and strategic importance of emancipation became impossible to ignore. Escaped slaves, known as contrabands, flocked to Union lines, and abolitionists in the North pushed for a war against slavery itself, not just secession. The turning point came in 1863 with the Emancipation Proclamation. While it didn't free all slaves overnight, it fundamentally changed the nature of the war. It declared that all enslaved people in the Confederate States were, thenceforward, and forever free. Suddenly, the Union Army became an army of liberation. This transformed the conflict into a moral crusade, a fight for freedom and human dignity. It also had a huge strategic impact, crippling the Confederate war effort by encouraging slaves to flee and allowing for the recruitment of nearly 200,000 black soldiers into the Union Army. The war raged for 4 long, bloody years. From the fields of Gettysburg to the trenches of Vicksburg, Americans fought Americans in a brutal and devastating conflict. The scale of the loss was staggering. By the time Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865, the war had claimed over 620,000 military lives. That's more American casualties than in World War I and World War II combined. Entire cities were left in ruins, and the Southern economy was completely shattered. But out of this unimaginable destruction, a new nation was born. The Civil War settled two fundamental questions that had plagued the country since its founding. It affirmed the indivisibility of the United States, and with the passage of the 13th Amendment, it abolished the institution of slavery forever. The war's aftermath, known as Reconstruction, was a tumultuous period of trying to rebuild the South and integrate millions of newly freed African Americans into society. It was a messy, often violent process, and its legacy continues to shape American society to this day. The story of the Civil War is a powerful reminder of how fragile a nation can be and the incredible costs of division. It's a complex and often painful part of our history, but it is one we must understand to appreciate the struggles that have shaped the country we live in today. From a secession madness, sparked by an election, a national crisis became a crucible that redefined the meaning of freedom and union in America. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this dive into history interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.